Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? It's fitting that I'm filming this one during my commute because this time we're going to talk about the future of cars. So cars have traditionally never really been that big of a technology type of topic. I've always felt that there's been kind of a divide between cars and other forms of technology. Cars have always been a more mechanical thing, more kind of along the realm of engineering, whereas technology has always, of course, been more electronic. But as time has gone on, we've seen the two get closer and closer together. And where we've seen rapid advances are really just in the most recent time period, kind of like the last few years. And it's changing very, very quickly. There are really two parts to where cars are going and will end up, I think. And I'm hoping to talk about both of those. The first part, of course, is perhaps the biggest one, and that is the fuel. What is the source of fuel for cars of the future? Where is that going to go? And it's very, very clear that petroleum is on its way out as a source of fuel for at least kind of regular cars, passenger vehicles, SUVs, that sort of thing. And the main contender to take over for it, what I think will ultimately win, even though it isn't necessarily the best thing, I think ultimately it's going to be just regular electric batteries, probably lithium ion or some sort of technology similar to that. That's really where the market seems to be heading, and that's really where the market seems to be putting the most money in terms of research and development. The biggest advances seem to be in getting battery technology to be smaller and lighter and more energy dense. Better bang for buck, really. Whereas the other major contender, and I think is perhaps the better solution for a few reasons, the other option is hydrogen fuel cell. The big thing that the battery technology has going for it is it's able to piggyback off of technology we already have. There have been lots of advances in battery technology for a long time now. We've actually had lithium-ion batteries for quite a while, and there's still quite a bit more that can be eked out of them in terms of the battery chemistry and trying to get them better suited as a platform for providing energy for moving vehicles. Hydrogen fuel cells are actually a lot closer to the traditional way that we handle with fueling cars, in that it's a product you put into the vehicle, you fill it up. There's a tank that gets filled, and the vehicle draws that tank down as it's driven. But there are pros and cons to both approaches, but there's also a major change in mindset. Where hydrogen fuel cell to me makes a lot of sense in that is that we can leverage the existing distribution network we already have. There are gas stations everywhere, and people are used to having gas stations everywhere. And it makes a lot of sense to have gas stations everywhere because people don't always just commute on a daily basis. You know, a lot of us, when you're just doing kind of your daily grind, you're used to going and getting gas once a week. Hydrogen fuel cells kind of follow that same model where you're just drawing down the tank and eventually the needle on your dashboard says empty and you go fill it up again. They've got decent range to them. The other thing though is because it's so rapid to fill that hydrogen tank up, it only takes a few minutes to do it. That also really kind of fits the usage model that a lot of larger countries have, at least in terms of land mass. In the US, a lot of people will drive their vehicles long distances, take road trips, that sort of thing. They're not just used for commuting. Where electric vehicles make a lot of sense is when you're just doing that daily grind over and over and over again, where you just drive from home to work, and you can plug the car in at work maybe, or maybe it's a shorter commute and you just drive home and plug it in again when you get home. Electric vehicles really don't work that well for long distances. Even though the batteries may get to the point where you get the same range out of them as you would a petroleum-based vehicle or a hydrogen fuel cell-based vehicle, the fact is it still takes longer to recharge those batteries. Even things like Tesla's supercharger, it can take like an hour to recharge that battery pack. Well, if you get maybe 200, 300 miles out of a charge, it's possible to drive 600, 700 miles in a day. I've had to do it where I've had to take a road trip to drive out of state. And in a regular petroleum vehicle, that's no big deal, because you know that when the needle hits empty, you just go find the nearest fueling station, you fill up the tank, it takes 5 minutes to do it, and off you go. But with the prospect of having to stop every 200 so miles and wait an hour for your battery to charge, that starts to become inconvenient. It adds 2 to 3 hours to an already day-long road trip. And I don't think that's necessarily time that people are going to want to or be willing to spend. So fuel cell vehicles make a lot of sense in that regard, because existing gas stations can conceivably get converted over to selling hydrogen instead, or in addition to petroleum. And it's just that, you roll up to a pump, you put the nozzle in the tank, you let it fill up, and 5 minutes or so later, you're done. And you can keep driving. So there's a lot more convenience to it. The bigger thing that you'll also see in the difference between the two, at least when you move to electric vehicles that are battery powered, not fuel cell, is there's actually a major shift in the way that you drive them, in terms of how often you fuel them. The mindset is that you would run the battery down until it's empty and then you charge it up again. But that's not necessarily the best way to deal with that battery on a daily basis. The battery technology actually works better if you do shorter frequent cycles. Oh, I'm sorry, lady. It was my turn to go, but apparently it's yours. See, cars. I'm dealing with cars. And people not driving them well, which we will get to in just a moment, about people not driving cars well. The bigger shift that we'll actually see with battery-powered electric vehicles is you'll actually just charge them everywhere. It won't be so much you drive around all day and then you plug it in at night, or you plug it in once a week or whatever. It'll actually be you drive from your house to the grocery store, you'll plug in at the grocery store. You'll drive from the grocery store to the mall, you'll plug in at the mall. You'll drive from the mall to somewhere else, you'll plug in that somewhere else. So you'll always be topping off the battery, and that works great for most use cases, I think. And because the real impact to getting off of petroleum is the commuters, it's not so much the long road trip kind of stuff. I think that makes the most sense, is to go with batteries in that regard. You're just constantly topping them up. It doesn't take very long because, you're in the grocery store anyway. Let the battery recharge a bit. You move on to the mall. Well, you're going to be in the mall for a while. You let the battery recharge. So it's a shift in mindset for people. And it's also a kind of a shift in how you pay for that fuel. Because it's electric, now you're going to kind of be paying everywhere if you adopt that let's charge it whenever I park kind of mentality. And there's going to be an ecosystem that'll grow around that. I'm not quite sure how that'll work, whether it'll be, you swipe some kind of card type of deal and they just charge your account for however many minutes or however many kilowatts or whatever you use. But I think that could kind of swing the pendulum away from the inconvenience aspect of having this battery that takes a while to charge. So the downside to hydrogen fuel cell, there's a lot of upsides to it. The downside really is just the fuel itself. Unfortunately, hydrogen, even though it's abundant in the universe, is actually difficult to get in pure form. And it's expensive to get in pure form. And not a lot of investment has been made, it seems, into making that cost come down. They always say, well, if the demand is there, then that'll drive the innovation and the cost will come down. Well, the demand isn't there. That's the thing. There are actually a number of electric only or electric hybrid vehicles already on the road. I've never seen a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle driving around in public. Whereas I'm at the point where I'm seeing a Tesla or a Nissan Leaf pretty much every day. That's the other downside to hydrogen fuel cell is it's a really cool technology and it slots in well with the way that society works now. But the demand just isn't there because it just came on later and it couldn't be innovated upon like an electric vehicle could. So I think we're going to see not necessarily an incredibly rapid adoption of electrical vehicles. I don't think we're going to see a point where 99% of vehicles on the road within 5 years are going to be all electric, just because of the sheer cost of the vehicles. But I do think that's the way it's going to be headed. I think it's going to be like battery-based vehicles. Tesla is obviously kind of the leader in that front. The other interesting thing that what I think is more interesting about where cars are headed, other than the fuel thing, is the concept of autonomous vehicles. For some reason, electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles tend to get lumped together. There's really no technical reason why they need to be. It's entirely possible to build a fully autonomous vehicle that runs off of petroleum. And there have been plenty of R&D based vehicles that do. Whether they're manufacturer R&D projects or like research things in higher education, trying to deal with that technology. So they really are separate issues. They get lumped together quite a bit. And that kind of speaks a lot to the whole mindset of where vehicles are going. But autonomous vehicles, I think, are really the more interesting story. I mean, yeah, it's cool to have an electric vehicle, but all it really does is just change the power plant. Autonomous vehicles change the nature of a car and driving. There are major pros and cons to autonomous vehicles. In a situation like this, where I'm just commuting home, I would love to have an autonomous vehicle just on its face, because I could sit back and relax and just talk with you guys or watch YouTube or get work done or read a book or whatever, right? I just let the car take me home. The downside to that is all of the what ifs. There's a lot of logic that still, I think, needs to get thought through on many different fronts. The first one is that I have this feeling that all these autonomous vehicles are being written with Southern California weather in mind. As you may know, I live in Minneapolis. We get snow here. We get snow here several months out of the year. And a lot of times that snow comes down pretty heavy to the point where the roads not only become slippery, loss of traction, difficult to control, but you also just can't see them. You can't see the lane markings. They try to get out and plow as soon as they can, but there are only so many plows and there's a lot more road, and so it takes some time. So the first thing that I wonder is, how are autonomous cars going to handle inclement weather? Yeah, they tout all the technology that these cars have, how there's the cameras and the radar and the sensors. They can sense all the cars around you, and they can, watch the stripes on the road so the car knows how it stays in its lane, that sort of thing. But how is it going to handle a situation where it can't see those stripes on the road? And maybe even if it can see the stripes on the road, how is it going to handle a loss of traction kind of situation? You go around a corner and suddenly the road gets a lot slipperier than it was and the car wants to slide. How is a computer going to handle that? How is a computer going to anticipate that? A good driver can actually anticipate that kind of stuff. Maybe they remember, I remember this section of road tends to get slippery when it snows more than this other section of road, so you just proactively slow down. Maybe you can see in advance, visually, that looks like that's kind of a sketchy corner. I should slow it down as I'm going around it. What is a computer going to do in that case? Is it going to just try and trudge through it? Are they going to try and program their way around it? Is the car just going to continue on as usual? Or is the car going to go into fail-safe mode and just say, screw it, I can't do it. Dude, you take the wheel and let the driver take over? That's something that I haven't really heard much talk about. The other thing that is a bit deeper of a thought is, what about potential accidents? Or what about the Kobayashi Maru kind of scenario, the no-win scenario? Think about a situation like this. An autonomous car is driving down a city street, and there's an oncoming car driven by a drunk that swerves into your lane. The choices are this. The car can't go to the left because that's where this oncoming car is, right? It's coming at you, it's swerving kind of around. If you swerve to the left, you're going to hit that oncoming car. It's going to nail you head on. Typically, you would swerve to the right. But what if to the right is a sidewalk? And that sidewalk is a bus stop with a bunch of people standing there. So you've got this no-win scenario where you could swerve to the right, but you're probably going to hit a bunch of innocent pedestrians. You could swerve to the left or stay going straight and end up having the car get hit by this oncoming car. What does a computer do in that scenario? Well, there's 3 different ways I can think of for the car to handle that. The first one is to be protective of the occupants of the vehicle. And that is to say, you know what, I'm the car, I'm driving, my occupants are the number one priority. So it says screw it, and it swerves to the right. Dives into the crowd of people. People get hurt, but it's protected the occupants of the vehicle. The other option is the altruistic approach. The car can sense there are people on the sidewalk, they're innocent, don't hit them. The car has built-in safety features. The occupants are hopefully wearing seatbelts, there's airbags, there's that sort of thing. The car decides, you know what, I'm going to take the hit. So it goes ahead, and it lets the car get hit by that oncoming vehicle. It may try to brake, lessen the damage, but it's going to go ahead and take the hit, potentially risking its own passengers. But there's some level of safety there. Hopefully the car can protect them. The third option is for the car to do nothing and kind of go into the screw it, dude, you're in charge kind of mode. The car just lets go and says, driver, you need to figure out what you want to do. In that scenario, and then also that original scenario of inclement weather, the car can't handle it, it's going to put the responsibility back on the driver. Here's the thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about, and I think it's really important in the long run, is if there ultimately is some scenario where the human behind the wheel has to take over, driving skill is going to become a factor, especially since you're basically asking the driver to take over in a stressful situation, make a choice, and perform a skilled maneuver of some sort. It's not just take this exit, press the brake, turn the wheel, do a normal, kind of muscle memory type of driving action. How well do you think that driver is going to be able to respond? One, if they're put in charge of the car in a hurry and has to make a decision split second. 2, after some time, that driver will have gotten used to not being in charge of the car. Because think about it, most of the time, daily driver type of situations, that driver, we're going to be at a point where the person behind the wheel won't have to do anything. From parking lot to driveway, the car's just going to do it all. Driving skill overall is going to decrease rapidly as time goes on. So do you really want an autonomous car saying, you know what, screw it, I can't handle this, the responsibility is now on the driver, passing control to a driver who can barely drive themselves? I don't know. And that's where I think kind of my fear of autonomous vehicles comes into play. I shouldn't say fear, I should say hesitance. It's not so much I'm hesitant or inconfident in the technology. It's where the human aspect comes into it. How well are autonomous vehicles going to be able to handle traditional vehicles still on the road? You know, until we get to some point where the vast majority of vehicles are all autonomous and they can talk to each other and traffic jams become a thing of the past and all these other utopian type of things that they say will eventually get with autonomous vehicles. One, how are autonomous vehicles going to handle with all the other humans on the road who may or may not be following the rules? The autonomous vehicles are going to follow the rules. They're not going to go, you know what, screw it, I'm going to break the law. They're just going to do what they're programmed to do. So how are autonomous vehicles going to handle that? The second thing is, if you do ever end up in a situation where that car has to pass control back to the driver, how well is a relatively unskilled at that point driver going to handle it? I don't know. And then that, of course, raises all these other questions about, well, with autonomous vehicles, if they're fully autonomous, are driver's licenses even going to be necessary? I've heard talk about us getting to the point where you could put your little kid alone in an autonomous vehicle and have the car drive the kid to school. And then, you know, when the kid gets out, the car just turns around and drives home by itself. You know, can we really place that much faith in this technology, given all of the variables that driving entails? And at that point, I want to turn it over to you. So sound off down in the comments below. Where do you think things are headed? What do you think is the most likely scenario for vehicles in terms of both electric vehicles? There's a BMW i3, you just saw it, that's all electric. See, there's my one for the day. And then also, what do you think about the autonomy aspect of it? Are we ever going to get cars that are 100% purely autonomous with zero interaction required by the driver? Or will we always need, to some level, drivers to be skilled and licensed and have practice in the event the computer can't keep up? Hit me up with your thoughts down in the comments. Also, let me know future topics you'd like me to talk about. May not get to them right away, but I definitely put them on a list. If you like this video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. That helps me out quite a bit. You'll also get notified as to when I do my next episode. If you want to reach out to me, another great way to do so is Twitter and Instagram @thisdoesnotcom. And as always, thanks for watching.